Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Charity Engine webinar. It's so great to have you here. So we're gonna jump right into it and get started. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us today to learn about nonprofit storytelling and how to tell your nonprofit story in a way that engages audiences and inspires giving. My name is Caroline Cook. I'm Charity Engine's Senior Digital Marketing Manager, and I will be moderating today's webinar. So before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items to go over. This webinar is being recorded, so a link of the recording will be shared within 24 hours. All lines are muted, so don't worry if your cell phone rings or your dog barks at the doorbell. You're all set there. And if you have any questions for our speaker, please use the questions tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will have time to, at the end, to answer your questions. So now if you want to just use the chat to introduce yourself, your organization, let us know where you're calling in from. We'd love to see where everyone is calling in from. I see some typing. Cicely, great. Northern Illinois Food Bank. Got some Colorado. Wow. Family policies. Sunny Arizona. That's nice.
Oh.
Oh, wow. All over. Well, welcome, everyone.
Wow. Yeah.
It's great to...
Snowing in Michigan.
Ooh.
Oh, my gosh. I'm a Michigander. Where are you in Michigan?
Got some Reading. That's close to where you are.
Well, I mean, I'm a former Michigander. I grew up in Michigan.
Oh, nice.
Southeast Michigan, near the Ohio border.
There you go. Great. Well, thank you,
Hi,
everyone.
Christine. I know Christine.
Habitat for Humanity. Great. Hi, everyone. Awesome. Well, so it's a pleasure to introduce our featured speaker today, who empowers small nonprofits to raise money for raise the money of their dreams while keeping their donors front and center. She is the author of Simple Development Systems, Successful Fundraising for the One-Person Shop, the founder of Basics and More Fundraising Fundamentals course, and publisher of the Grow Report, the leading weekly e-newsletter for small nonprofits. She was also named one of the 50 most influential fundraisers by the Civil Society magazine and was named one of the top 30 most effective fundraising consultants by Michael Chapman Giving Show. She has also been featured by the Chronicle of Philanthropy and hosts a weekly micro webinar series, Motivate Monday. It is a pleasure to welcome her to the webinar stage of Charity Engine. Thank you so much for joining us today, Pamela Grow.
Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction, Caroline. I'm so thrilled to be here today and thrilled to see all these wonderful, I'm assuming, smiling faces. Anne and Dominique and Karen and Emily and Shayna and Molly and Jana and David and Angela and Ed. I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
And I'm going to
let me see. And I'm actually going to take off my camera just for the remainder of the till we get back to questions. And let's see. Let's get started. This is my first time using this platform. So, how do I get rid of the camera? Let's see. I don't know.
should be on the
Okay.
tab there.
On the what?
On the lower bottom tab there, you'll see a...
Oh, there it is. Yeah, something was hiding it. Okay. How's that? Excellent. Super. Well, thanks again for being here today, and thank you, Charity Engine, for hosting this webinar. I'm really, really thrilled to be talking about nonprofit storytelling. Can everybody see my screen okay? I'm hearing like a beeping noise. Let me just make sure.
That is just the chat.
Oh, that's the chat, and I can turn that off, right? Or can I turn off the notification noises?
When you click the chat, you should be able to see that notification bell.
Right.
There you go.
Let me turn that off. Okay, it's just a little distracting. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Caroline introduced me, but my name is Pamela Grow. I have worked with thousands of nonprofits all over the world, just like yours. I specialize primarily in working with smaller to mid-sized nonprofits, and I specialize in setting up what I call donor attraction systems. In addition to that, I live on the outskirts of the city of Philadelphia. I am a mother to 2 daughters. There is my daughter, my youngest daughter there, Abigail, and my oldest daughter is actually she's you can see her in the lower right-hand corner because she runs the best Mexican food truck in the city of Philadelphia. And that is my grand puppy on the left. I like museums and hiking and nature and reading, and I love baking. That's my chocolate babka from COVID baking. And I love classic films. Like Caroline said, I'm also the author of Simple Development System. We have raised hundreds of millions for students and clients. I've taught over 10,000 nonprofits from around the world. I know the power of fundraising systems and really individual giving to transform your nonprofit once you get these systems in place to really grow your individual giving. And I believe strongly in you and your good work. So I always throw this slide in at the beginning because I know what a totally distractible world we live in right now. And I know myself that when I'm on a webinar, oftentimes I'm maybe writing copy for a client or on Twitter and doing a million things at once. So if you can, try to get rid of distractions. In today's webinar, you're going to be discovering the one thing that is going to magically transform your nonprofit's fundraising. It's not TikTok. It's not Instagram or even Facebook fundraisers or going digital or even saying thank you too much. Okay, I lied. Because you can never say thank you too much, right? But the answer really lies in the stories you share. And in today's session, we're going to be talking about the brain science behind why storytelling works, how to get everyone from your board to your volunteers to your program staff on board, sharing effective stories, where to find your organization's stories, how to repurpose the stories for the web, for newsletters, for events, and more, how to use storytelling in social media and the role of pictures and video, and how to use storytelling in grant seeking. I think it's kind of a little bit harder now than it used to be. How to hook your reader from the first sentence. And when I was just starting to put this webinar together, I read this article from Harvard Business Review, and it's called "If You Want to Raise Prices, You Can Tell a Better Story." If you Google it, it'll come right up. And it's a really interesting article how this columnist, I think he was for the New York Times, he really wanted to find out, you know, what makes, say, one toaster sell for $20 and another toaster sell for $400, right? They both make toast. So what's the difference? And he started out on this little experiment where he essentially bought junk at yard sales and then wrote a story about each piece of junk and sold it. I think it was on eBay. And believe it or not, he managed to sell a miniature jar of mayonnaise for $51 just with the story he told. And you all know this, and I mean, if If you look at any industry, especially, say, skincare, the hype and the story behind it is oftentimes what sells the product, not the actual ingredients, which can be found in pretty much any generic product. And I experienced this myself. Gosh, this was about, I want to say about 20 years ago. My daughter was hospitalized, and I had to quit my job and stay home with her. And I was newly divorced, and I started going out to auctions. I'd go to anywhere between 1 and 3 auctions a week, and I would buy stuff up, and then I would sell it on eBay, and this was how I was supporting my family for about a year. And needless to say, I'd always loved vintage and antique stuff, but I had no background in it, didn't know what the heck I was doing. And while I made some really terrific buys, like one time I bought a pair of table lighters, old-fashioned table lighters from the '40s for about $20 each and turned them around. One went for 250 and the other went for 350. But oftentimes I made some pretty bad buys, like the time I bought these wooden Dutch children's shoes, and I think I paid about $25 for them only to come home and do my research. We didn't have cell phones back then, and, find out they were essentially worth nothing. But I had been collecting catalogs. Anybody remember J. Peterman? Was one of my favorites. J. Peterman, Smithsonian, those type of catalogs that have really wonderful, really evocative copy. And I used that to they were sort of my swipe files, and they were how I wrote up the stories about the items that I bought. And yeah, I managed to turn these shoes around. And while I'm not going to say I tripled the price, I did get at least $50 for them. So we know how important storytelling is for nonprofit fundraising. Is everybody familiar with this particular story? Because it was really one of my favorites. This was about gosh, if you're familiar with Humans of New York, this was about a 1 week, maybe even 2 week arc where the photographer Brandon told the story of Stephanie Johnson, who was a burlesque dancer known as Tanqueray in the city of New York, and she had fallen on hard times, and they brought in over 2.5 million in donations. So in the times that we're living in right now, these incredibly distracting times, nothing will cut through for you quite like storytelling. It's got a lot of power, and it's really important to focus on it. I love this quote from Brené Brown. The idea that we're wired for story is more than a catchy phrase. Neuroeconomic I never can pronounce that. Paul Zak has found that hearing a story, a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end, causes our brain to release cortisol and oxytocin. These chemicals trigger the uniquely human abilities to connect, empathize, and make meaning. Story is literally in our DNA. And think about it. Every morning I start my day, sometimes I'm even still in bed, on Google Chat with my sweetie Rob. And this morning I was telling him about this dream I had last night where a flying saucer landed in my backyard. The weird thing about this particular dream is that this flying saucer landed in my backyard, and I was very nonchalant about it. I remember I'm looking out in the yard and I'm thinking, "Oh, that's interesting." It was like things are so weird, can they possibly get any weirder? But that's all I'm trying to say is we think in terms of storytelling, we are engaged in it all the time. But yet storytelling can be really hard. Why is it so hard? What makes storytelling hard? This is where I'm going to ask you really quickly to share your challenges. And I think that Caroline has a poll to go up, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, I like that, Randy. Randy says, sell the sizzle, not the steak. The human attention span is worse than a goldfish. It absolutely is right now. And that's why storytelling is more important, most important. Do we have that, Caroline, the poll, or should I just ask everyone to go ahead and type into the chat section?
I do have the poll. Are everyone is everyone seeing it here? It should be.
Oh, can I launch it on my end?
You should see it. Oh, here we go. Publish poll. Here you
You know, I really like this platform.
go.
Does everybody see the, and you can select as many as you'd like. And also feel free to type in the chat box if there are other specific challenges that you have. Interesting. I don't know that we can share the poll, the results of the poll, but I'm going to go ahead and go back to the presentation here. And it looked like the answers were coming up pretty similar to this when I polled the members of our last storytelling class. And it was kind of much it was kind of pretty much everything is a challenge, but knowing what kinds of stories resonate with our donors tended to come up the most. And before we get into that, I'm just going to say that having your donor story is really should be at the forefront of your fundraising efforts, really understanding why your donors gave. Why do they give? You know, maybe they came in through a peer-to-peer event. Maybe they attended an event. Maybe they gave an in memoriam or a tribute gift and they're a one-time donor. You'll never see them again. Maybe they have some sort of personal connection to your mission. You know, maybe they're a former board member or a former board member introduced them to your mission. Maybe they have a child that was affected by your mission. Maybe I'm seeing, you know, you see this more and more now. Maybe their parents or even grandparents may have supported your nonprofit. I worked for an Easter Seals, and a lot of the donors, you know, their parents and even grandparents had given to Easter Seals, and it was just almost like a tradition. It's a tax incentive. They may be responding to a challenge. There's all kinds of reasons. But your biggest job as a fundraiser is to find out. So it's not all about these wonderful programs that you run or all the wonderful, wonderful good you do. It's really about why your donors give. And one of the absolute best things that you can do, and I've been saying this for years and years and years, when your software alerts you to a gift from a brand new donor is to drop everything and make a phone call to thank that donor. I just saw your gift come in and I just wanted to call and personally thank you. It means so much. If you have a minute, I'd really love to know what prompted your gift today. One of the best ways to really find out what makes your donors tick is simply to ask them. And you can do it through a dedicated story campaign, which is one of my favorite things. And I usually include at least one, preferably two, throughout the course of a year, in addition to your spring appeal, your fall appeal, your year-end appeal, your newsletters, all your other donor communications. Factor in one or two storytelling campaigns. And this one was from Planned Parenthood, where they had a week, it was a week or a 2-week long campaign where they asked people to share their own experiences, and then it went across social media as well. That was a tweet from, someone named Celia talking about her great-great-grandmother who died of an illegal abortion. And when you're doing this, be very, very specific. This is a client of mine, um, the anniversary of George Floyd's death, they sent out this email. They had a series of emails. I think they ran it for about 2 weeks. Join us in honoring George Floyd's life by sharing stories of community healing and hope. So they were positive, uplifting stories that mostly parents, this is a great organization, they work with children, um, that mostly parents sent in, but just really, really beautiful, very specific, looking for something short and sweet that we can share. They also, in terms of, I just have this part of the form, but if you look at the form, it's very, very specific. They ask for permission. If you don't want them using your name, they won't use their name. It's just a great idea. Be intentional. Always be very intentional. What do you want your supporter? What do you want your donor to do? Um, this came right after I either subscribed or I believe I donated to one.org. They asked one question. Do you think we'll see the end of extreme poverty in our lifetime? So, one more quick poll, and then I won't bother you anymore. Are you currently making storytelling a practice in your organization? Yes, no, or sometimes? Thanks for taking a minute to vote. I'm going to go ahead and check the chat. Super. So, what we've got so far, 11% say no, 38% say yes, good on you, and 51% says sometimes. I think you probably can already see where we're going with this. And this is pretty much the response I got with one of my previous classes as well. So I am a strong believer in fundraising systems. Just having something that you can replicate and do over and over and over again to grow your individual giving. And the most important drivers of your fundraising success, and I'm kind of guessing that you all are interested in growing your individual giving program, come down to just a few simple things. And those things are data, storytelling, and obviously your relationships. And the smart fundraiser really recognizes this and creates systems to focus on success drivers. And the thing of it is that the success drivers, they're pretty basic, right? I'm not talking about, your TikTok account. I'm talking about your data, your donor data, your storytelling, and your relationships and how you interact with your data. And a system is something as simple as a set of principles or procedures according to which something is done, an organized framework or method. So, what do you want to include in your storytelling systems? Well, obviously, you want to include client stories. If yours is an organization that works with clients, donor and supporter stories. These are so great and they're so underutilized in our profession. Board member stories, your founding story, your community story, volunteer stories. And then, of course, with every story, what is the goal for the story? Any kind of photos, sources, interviews, dates, 6-word stories, etc. Why did I put this slide? I remember. I put this slide in as a reminder that it's really, I always found it super beneficial to have a one-on-one 15, 30 hour long conversation individually with all of your board members to get their stories. They can be so eye-opening. So, how do you get everyone from your board to volunteers to program staff on board and sharing effective stories? Well, you want to reinforce the importance of storytelling all the time. You can share stories that capture your attention from other nonprofits. One organization that I worked with every Monday, they had a oh, I forget what they called it. I think they might have actually called it Motivations Monday. But they had a meeting with all their staff, all their volunteers, and they would have someone from the, one of their clients sharing a story. Really, really great. Make it a practice to read and reflect on the Humans of New York stories with your team members. Spend personal one-on-one time with each of your board members. Why did they get involved? And create a shared story bank and refer staff and volunteers to it often. How is your organization making storytelling a practice? Go ahead and type into the chat box. And then use Google Drive or whatever you ever you want. Maybe you're using Trello or any of the dozens of tools out there and set up your organization's story bank. Now, I actually had someone on Motivate Monday, and this is a few years ago, but it's still a very worthwhile training. I've got the link to it there, and I'm pretty sure you're getting the slides to this. So there's a 30-minute training on setting up your nonprofit storytelling digital story banking tool. And I bring up Honey again because I love Honey. Who doesn't love Honey? But make it a real point to follow them on Facebook or Instagram. It'll do your heart a world of good. Share the stories with your coworkers and discuss them. The I think the beauty of Honey is that love that's in every one of their stories and how they're always respectful and thoughtful and totally empathetic. That's the kind of storytelling that you aim to really emulate. Am I right? I'm gonna go ahead and quickly check and see if anybody has is in chat. Wow, Joe says we had a video done with a client testimony about 2 years ago and people are still talking about it. Oh, I'd love to see that. Diana says our publication highlights donors. It comes out twice a year. Randy says Scots have a history of storytelling. Isn't that the truth? I worked for a grant making foundation, and the family was Irish, and the storytelling was unbelievable. Let me get back to this. So where do you find stories? Well, program staff are the best source for stories, obviously. And I know some folks struggle with sometimes sometimes program staff are distrustful of fundraisers. They don't quite understand what we do. And I always like to make it a point to make friends with program staff. Now, granted, I always worked in smaller organizations, so we might have a total team of anywhere between 10 and 50 people, but I always made it a point to make friends with program staff and usually even to schedule a day shadowing them or a half a day shadowing them and really find out, what they would love to see in terms of growth for the organization, what more they would like to do. Always show them the impact of the stories they share. If you're writing up a story that a program staffer has given you and you're not quite sure if the way you're telling it is true and authentic, let them see it. Let them take a look at it. Show them how more money will benefit them and not you. And a little gratitude goes a long, long, long way. I used to bake cookies for program staff when I got a particularly great story. Here's an example of a client story that I really, really loved. Um, and the reason I'm using this as a great example because again, we're talking about the distractibility of today's society and how important it is to really distill your message down to the most powerful thing you can. So when Fernando turned 18, he registered to vote, but he never had the chance to cast a ballot. At 21, he was arrested, convicted of murder. He spent 18 years in prison before he was finally exonerated. After he got out, he voted for the very first time in his life. Now he says voting is a family affair. This is a really inspirational, and it's in an email. See how short it is? And I love this picture of Carissa, his daughter. No details. Nothing about how the staff worked to get him released from prison. And then a lot of social media shares. So how do you know what to include and what to leave out? This is one of my very favorite tools. How can you distill your mission in a way that's relatable, respectful, and understandable, like the story we just saw? This is a little exercise that is in the book Train Your Board by Andy Robinson and Andrea Kilstead. It is currently out of print, but it will be should be back in print soon. I have included the six-word storytelling exercise in your handouts because it is one of my favorites. The whole premise is, for instance, this is from Ernest Hemingway. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. You can see how those 6 words tell a very sad story very succinctly. And it's not easy to write a 6-word story, but download this exercise, use it yourself, use it with every story. If you've noticed with the story banking tool, there's even a space there for your own 6-word stories because it's great to do this with every single story. This is another tool I pass on any chance I get. This is from Mark Phillips over at Blue Frog Fundraising in the UK. It is such a great little Venn diagram. These are the things that you want to tell your donor. You want to tell your donor all about your mission and why we need your money and what we believe in, our new approach and how unique we are, right? And how great we are. But what does a donor want to hear from you? That you think they're special, that you know why they give and what they care about, that you've remembered what they've done and what they've said. And and right there at the heart of it, how we helped solve a problem. And I'm a copywriter by trade, and I actually have this posted above my desk because this helps me in so many ways. Also wanted to point you to Nashville Rescue Mission. They have a donor newsletter that they regularly raise about $2 million just through their donor newsletter, no ask. And how do they do that? They actually do it with an 8-page, 4-color newsletter that is mailed monthly to donors only who give frequently and consistently. I know that the last time I talked to someone at Nashville Rescue Mission, they would occasionally test it to non donors. Michelle said, I depend on everyone who works with the mission's guests, clients, and volunteers to be my eyes and ears in constant communication with numerous staff members who help me find specific stories. And then she usually pulls 2 stories from that month's newsletter for the monthly email blast. Once you get in the habit of having these systems and having a regular, like a bucket of stories, you'll be going back to them and repurposing them all the time. Highlight your supporter stories. There is no better way to highlight your supporter stories than on your planned giving page if you have one. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology is one of the best organizations I've seen doing this. They've got tons of donor stories. I urge you to check out their planned giving section in particular. Here's another one. But it doesn't have to be just planned giving. Look at this wonderful, wonderful campaign from Orbis. It's a Valentine's Day campaign for monthly to grow their monthly giving program. And they highlighted one of their monthly donors, Nancy Hayward, who is a former school teacher. She says, my monthly gifts are modest, but in combination with those from my fellow partners in site, they're making a mark. Great little campaign. How can you repurpose stories? Well, we have been hearing for a long time now about multi-channel and how you really need to be using all different forms of media right now. The best thing to do is to be where your donors are. These are some quotes from some stats from Pew Research Center. YouTube and Facebook continue to dominate the online landscape, with 81 and 69% respectively reporting. Using these sites, adults under 30 stand out for their use of Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. I'm surprised at Snapchat, which I didn't think was really much used anymore. Majority of 18 to 29-year-olds say they use Instagram or Snapchat, and about half say they use TikTok. But how old is the typical donor? The typical donor, your best donor, is 75 years old. And I'll probably get some flack for this, but I see a lot of folks spending their days posting on social media, and I'm with very little in return. So what that looks like for most of our students and for most of our clients is pretty much direct mail with an email and Facebook component. So if yours is a small nonprofit or you think you have limited resources, that really means direct mail, email, and Facebook. This is a campaign from Intervale Center, one of our students in Vermont. They do a Mother's Day campaign every year. Um, every single year. I think they've done it for a while now, for several years at any rate. They had it all set to go when lockdown happened, and they made a few small changes to their mailing and sent it out. They include both Facebook and Instagram, and absolutely, I'm sorry I don't have the numbers for you, but I know that they went way over goal with this particular campaign. So if you're a one or even two-person shop and you're spending your days posting on social media, the best advice I can give you is to pick one platform and master it, and let it be, a platform that your donors are using. So what about video? Pew says that 81% of folks are using YouTube. Caroline, can you share that one video? I wanted to share this one video with you because it is one of my favorite ways of really,
Sure thing.
this is the best way to use video if
Hey,
you're very
Glenn.
small,
Hey,
is
Glenn.
through
It's John
personal.
Thomas. I'm the managing director of the 4-H Foundation,
Thank
and just
yous.
wanted to say thanks for your donation. Day off for me here at home, but I did see your donation come through, and really appreciate your great generosity. After me is the state president of Arkansas 4-H, Grayson Friel, and he's going to let you know what your donations are doing and what you and these donations mean to him and other Arkansas 4-H kids. Thanks a lot. Merry Christmas. Have great holidays. Appreciate you.
That's a lovely little personalized thank you. That particular one is from Thank View, but I know that there are other companies out there. No, that one was actually from Gradavid. There's also ThankView, and then a lot of software companies have their own. And Melody, I'm sorry, I'm going too fast. You will get the slides. How to use storytelling in grant seeking. Well, this is what we're used to seeing in a grant proposal, right? But I spent close to 10 years actually working for one of Philadelphia's largest family foundations, family grant making foundations. And one of the things that I learned early on was that storytelling is the most effective way to have a funded grant proposal as well. We actually had one woman who had just started out her program. It was a faith-based program to help women and children. And I remember she had just started out, and her storytelling was so great that every time a proposal came in from her organization, the office manager would automatically make 5 copies because everyone from the president to the vice president of programming to our CFO wanted to be the first one to read Edith's proposal. That's how great her storytelling was. I still remember we had a 3-year limit on consecutive grants. We funded her for 5 or 6 years in a row because we loved the stories that she shared before we finally had to tell her to take a year off. At any rate, transform it into a story, and that's what you lead with in your summary of your grant proposal. I've actually managed to build tremendous basis of general operating support just with very strong storytelling. And getting back to the whole idea of, you know, really making it succinct. And I know that with all the online applications, it is harder to get your story in there now. The Hemingway app. Does anybody in here use the Hemingway app? It's something I use all the time. You put in your text, it will give you a reading grade level. You want to aim for fifth grade reading level or below, and it's going to help make your writing, as it says, bold and clear. It's a great tool, and I've actually included this tool in webinars for years. And then I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago, I realized, gee, Pam, you're not taking your own advice. You're not only using it once in a while. Now I use it for everything. It's particularly great when you're writing email copy. And when I'm writing email copy, I actually try to keep the grade level even lower, down to say third or fourth grade. And you'd be surprised. You'll be surprised at what you can do. One of my one of my dearest friends is a well-known nonprofit copywriter, and she has had letters come in at the second grade reading level, which kind of boggles my mind. So how do you hook your reader from the first sentence? Lisa Sargent recommends that you kind of envision a path and think about how you are leading your donor down that path. How are you taking your donor on a journey, really? How are you really inviting your reader into the picture? Think really carefully about those opening words. That was a headline I used in the middle of COVID, in the middle of lockdown. This is for a scholarship organization. When I was interviewing this young woman who had just received a scholarship for the from the organization, I found out that one of her earliest dreams, she wanted to be president. Now, her mom had died of a drug overdose. She was her only living relative, and she had been in foster care. This was for an alcohol treatment facility. So what about your year-end campaign? What stories work best? Again, we know that one story works best. Um, you've got some really impressive numbers and you want to share them. Well, one story works best. Eliminate jargon at all costs. And really, when you really get stuck, one of my favorite things to do is to just sit down with a yellow pad and write a letter like I'm writing to my dearest friend. And when in doubt, you can always repurpose. One of my favorite stories comes from Roger Craver over at the Agitator, and I believe this was a actually an animal organization. They have used the same control letter for 20 years because it works, and they've tested it against newer stories. You might be sick to death of a story, but your donors aren't. In fact, I'm kind of surprised myself to see this in action. I write a weekly newsletter, and sometimes it's tough to put out new content every single week. And so sometimes I go back. And when I go back, it always seems like that's when I get the most feedback. Oh, I love that story. Yeah, I've already shared that story 3 times. People don't get sick. They don't get sick of your stories. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And that's all you're really looking at. Indra Sinha is a UK copywriter. He says, "Don't start by writing, start by feeling. Feel and feel passionately, and the emotion you feel will come through the spaces in between the words." I want pink balloons at my funeral. This was a quote from a 5-year-old girl in hospice. Oops. Oh, this is where I need you again, Caroline, for the video.
Yes.
We got one last video.
At Catholic Charities, we've always known life was profoundly harder for the neighbors we serve. Neighbors who struggle with hunger, neighbors who struggle with housing, neighbors in West Oakland and Richmond struggle just to breathe with some of the highest asthma rates in the state. And then a global pandemic hit. Suddenly, it was crystal clear that while we all experienced the chaos of COVID-19, we didn't all experience it in the same way. COVID emphasized the disparities amongst our neighbors, and Catholic Charities had to pivot, and pivot fast, to provide the basics, like food and rent, and money for necessities, training, counseling, and case management, to help kids stay in school when school doors closed, to help nearly 80 families cope following the homicide of a loved one. Thanks to you, we were able to ramp up our work even in the darkest of times. When we did a special COVID-19 fundraiser, you came through for us, big time. Thanks to your compassionate support, Catholic Charities was able to respond. We've been responding to our community's emergencies for almost 90 years. With every gift you've made, you've helped provide essential services when they were needed the most. You've helped families rebuild their optimism and achieve stability in a frightening world. You've helped teens stay in school with after-school programs and counseling. Whenever there is a need, Catholic Charities East Bay answers. And thanks to every one of you, our services have been available to thousands in our community without pause. Your generous support has been a beautiful thing to witness. Pope Francis said, "The poor need a love that knows how to remain hidden and not think about all the good it has been able to do. For our neighbors, you have been that love. Thank you."
So the reason I shared that particular video is because this is an organization that has a lot of programs, very complex programs. And I just wanted you to see how we distilled that down. So what if you had an easy to follow template in the handouts? Do we have a handout section, Caroline? Well, you will get these materials after the webinar if you can't grab them now, but we have your story template. And while you're filling out the story template, I like to have one for every story. Consider, what emotion are you drawing on? How do you want your supporter to feel? In that video, for instance, we wanted the supporter to feel really proud of their support and to feel really appreciated. Is the story of a sensitive or confidential nature? What do you want your supporter to do? And who is your target audience? And think too, how will the stories going to play out on various channels? And then, of course, what's the 6-word story? I hope you find the 6-word story as helpful as I always have. So in the handouts, we have the 6-word stories, your story template, and another exercise from the Train Your Board book called The Case Simplified. which is another tool I really like for kind of distilling it down, if that makes sense. I would also highly encourage you to pick up Storytelling Can Change the World by Ken Burnett. If you haven't read that, this is one of the best books out there on storytelling that's specifically for nonprofits. And also Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand. A great tool because, again, Donald Miller, he's really about what it says right there, clarifying your message. I just read an appeal today that was really wonderful, but it went into extreme detail, and you don't need it. Oh, download your free fundraising and marketing calendar, although we're already in October, but we'll be coming out with a new calendar in November. And there is my contact information, Pamela at PamelaGrow.com, basicsandmorefundraising.com, and the fundraisingcalendar.com. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out for questions. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks, Mindy. And I'm sorry, some of you apparently were not able to see the video.
Great.
Oh, hey, Carolyn.
Hi, Pam. How's it
Let
going?
me see. I did it and then I didn't.
Great presentation. Thank you so much
Thank you.
through that. I know that people, as they're pointing out in the chat, that this is very helpful, really powerful messages that you shared, and I think there's a lot to be gained. So before we sign off, I know some people had some questions. So if you had any questions that you would like to ask Pamela, please drop them in the questions. I am going to go ahead and start with some of the questions we have here. So one question from Molly Fleener is she would like any tips as well as, one, what do you do if you are a very lean team? And two, how do you bring your Marcom team on board to support your donor storytelling efforts?
That is a really good question. It's funny because I've had this conversation with John Lepp, because I tend to think of all fundraising or all communications as fundraising. As he says, it's all fundraising. So it's really important that you bring your team on board. How big is your team, Molly?
Looks like she's typing. Donor comms is 2 people. And Marcom is 10.
Well, so if it's Marcom is what?
10 plus.
Oh, 10 plus. Do you meet with them regularly?
So
I would definitely meet with them on a regular basis. And, I think they should work as one. Sorry, I can't give a more helpful answer, but I really see them as one.
Says, and the foundation, my team is more narrowly focused. So we also have Sambach asked a couple questions here. First of which is, are there any don'ts in nonprofit storytelling?
For me, the biggest don't, and I think because I get it, because I like to do this myself, is you go into incredible detail. You want to say, well, we did this and we did this and we did this. You really want go back to that Venn diagram from Mark Phillips from Blue Frog Fundraising. How together you solve the problem, and just all these tools will just kind of help you with a 6-word storytelling exercise. The Hemingway app, I see a lot of you already use the Hemingway app. Yeah. Ashley says, I find that Marcom teams are generally resistant to supporting fundraising teams. I just see it as all fundraising. Even our systems, the donor newsletters, it's all about fundraising, even though they don't have an ask. When you do them well and you do them consistently, they raise a lot of money. But every organization is different too. And you have to find what works for every organization for your Yeah. Ashley says, I agree. We're all fundraisers. Yes.
So another question here: how long or short should your story be? I know we talked about the 6-sentence story. Do you think there is a perfect length?
No. How It depends, as long as it needs to be. I have tons of examples. If you actually go to my site and you just type in storytelling in the search, you'll get a lot of examples. But I use that particular email because it's such a great example of clarifying and distilling and only sharing what you need to share. But, are you writing a fundraising letter? In that case, it's probably going to be at least 2 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Some fundraisers will see a webinar and they'll say, well, 4-page letters perform better. Maybe a 4-page letter performed better in this particular study, but you're not going to take your story and drag it out and include a lot of detail that's unnecessary and lose the reader along the way. A lot of times you can do it in 2 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And I am finding myself as a writer keeping things much more concise now than I used to.
Mm-hmm. 100%. So do you think it's worthwhile to include data in your story? Is that better? Worse?
Yeah, again, it really depends on who your audience is. If you're approaching a funder, if this is for a grant proposal, of course you're going to be including the data. If it's to a major donor, maybe you'll be including the data. It really depends on who your audience is. It's one of my pet peeves is I see all these trainings, all these webinars on how to write a perfect fundraising letter, and none of them give any credence to who's reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Who's reading it?
Yeah.
Every donor is not created equal.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways.
Yeah, 100%. You got to really think about who your audience is, right? If it's young kids, it's they have the attention span of a TikTok video, right?
Right.
So I saw this in the chat here by many. Melody asked, "Can the slides be shared with us, pretty please?"
Of course, you have the slides, don't you? You know what? I'll make you another copy because I think I added a few slides.
Yes. And so we'll follow up with the slides, everyone, as well as the handout. So don't worry, we'll make sure to get you the recording, the slides, and the handout, since I know that this was just a gold mine of information that you want to be able to refer back to whenever you need it.
Randy said kiss, and I thought he was giving me a nice kiss, but no, keep it simple, stupid. Yeah. That is one thing you always have to keep in mind. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Especially now. Wow. More than ever.
Yes. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Pamela. This was a really insightful presentation and a great walkthrough of how to tell your story. I hope that everyone walked away with a lot of really valuable tidbits of information. I know that we have. So thank you again. We hope to see you all again at a future Charity Engine webinar and hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Caroline.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.